我在北京。
Why the world doesn't trust China. Now, when I'm referring to China, I'm talking about basically the CCP and not the people who live in China. Maybe you, like the same as me, do have friends in China, and your lives are near enough the same, or you may have Chinese people. You're just a different from a different part of the world. But why people don't trust China or the CCP, I would say stems back from way back from the Civil War. No, even before that, the Japanese Sino War. Now, Japan invaded China way back in the 1930s, when China, or mainland China, was the Republic of China. The Communist Party, the CCP, was still there, but it was ruled by the Republic. And the Republic fought the Japanese like anything to save their country. It didn't do very well. And we all heard of things related to maybe Nanking and how it went through Thailand, through Malaysia, through Singapore, into the Philippines, etc. That was Japan. But what were the CCP doing when the Republic of China was actually fighting the Japanese? Well, they were hiding in Chongqing in southwest China, and the American army, or the American Air Force, was actually there working, believe it or not, with Mad Mao. The war came to an end in 1945, World War II. China went into a civil war. The Communist Party won it. Why? Well, basically because the Republic of China were tired from fighting the Japanese, while the Communist Party in China just did very little. And in October the 1st, 1949, Mao declared China the People's Republic of China. People went happy. Hooray! Then Mad Mao started to do some crazy things. In round about the late 50s, he did the Great Leap Forward. Basically, you can joke, and it's the Great Leap Backwards. And it just destroyed China. And then the Cultural Revolution between the late 60s to the mid 70s, and people just died. I'm not going to go into the full history. So there we start to distrust the leadership of China. Now in 1979, China opened its doors to the world. And before that, 1971 or 1972, Nixon did actually come over to China to meet Mao. And this was the time when Taiwan was, you could say, in everyone's eyes, a country. It was only 1979 when a lot of countries said Taiwan is not a country. Now, my reasoning for this is because if the world didn't say, yeah, we are going to be friends and we're going to do business, but you've got to say that the People's Republic of China includes Taiwan. That's another story. So this was good news. But what happened during 1979 to 1989 was not much, really. The government got incredibly rich, but the people, you and I, the pawns of the society, basically got nothing. Hence, people got very tired of this, and in 1989 there was the Tiananmen Square incident, where the CCP army virtually killed about 10,000 people, and that is remembered quite often, even in Hong Kong. But the Chinese government, now that Chinese government owns Hong Kong once again, sort of don't allow it. Their first excuses were when COVID started, no mass gatherings. Okay, that's acceptable, but now COVID is over, they still don't allow it. So these were the things that people don't trust. The Mao era, and then everything was sort of like okay, but nothing for the people. The people protested in 1989. Then in 1990, after Tiananmen Square, the government started to give the Chinese people just a little bit more to keep them happy. So if you followed the rules, then you had quite a reasonable life. And many people did get very rich in China. There was one president or general secretary of China who said, let's get rich. And from, you could say, after Tiananmen Square till about 2012, you didn't hear much news about China, and everyone was sort of happy in that way. It was only 2012 or 2013 when Xi Jinping took over. And what he basically did in, let's say, 2014 was saying, I want Hong Kong now. Now, in 1984, there was a treaty signed with Margaret Thatcher and the president of China at the time saying, one country, two systems. But the things that people really don't trust now is all because of Xi Jinping. So let's see what he's done in his reign. Well, he put in national security law in Hong Kong. People in Hong Kong, the majority, not all, but the people in Hong Kong don't like it. Go and ask someone in Hong Kong, go and ask 100 people in Hong Kong, and they'll go, oh, they possibly won't say yes or no, because maybe they're a little bit scared. Like people in China, if you say, what do you think of Xi Jinping? They will go, oh, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to be overheard. There's too many creepy, crawly spies or informants around who would love to grass you up because they may give you an extra bit of money. So this is the downfall of people not trusting the actual government of China. And I would say mainly of Xi. So that was one. Then we have the South China Sea Islands, that dispute, and putting the military bases on. And paying some Western influencers in China to say there's no military bases there, we just did it for marine things. Well, it sort of worked perfectly okay before, so why did you need any marine bases there, not military? So, and even the international law, court said, no, you can't, but China says, we don't agree with the international court. And this is the thing that makes me quite mad. No one did anything about it. It's just there. And it's sort of this standoff that's been happening for years and years. Then we had more protests in 2019 in Hong Kong, and the Chinese government squashed this. And in 2020, we had the start of COVID. And this is the Chinese government. They started to blame every other country where their logistics just don't make sense. We don't trust them, period, because it seems to be lie after lie after lie. And we have this sort of status quo standoff with it, that they smile at each other. Xi and Biden would shake hands, whatever, but nothing gets done. During the end of COVID in China, there were protests, and you could hear some people saying, down with Xi Jinping, down with the CCP. You could hear that some people just did have enough of it, and it was like a tiny Tiananmen Square. But this time, when I mean tiny, you could say a couple of thousand people who weren't happy and shouting out these things about China, saying, we want change with that. So, in a nutshell, anything which really sort of happens with the Chinese policy, they get away with. They say one thing, but they do another thing. And when they don't want to listen to something, well, they just do their thing anyhow. And I think people are getting tired. My solution for all of this, now I'm a very simple guy, I'm not a politician, I see things black and white. When people start to explain things in a very complicated way, I sort of don't listen, because it seems to be like baloney to me, or just a piece of garbage. It doesn't make sense. We can talk about Israel and Gaza in that sense. Who invaded Israel? Simply Palestine, Hamas, that's it. So, but that's my sort of like reckoning. It's just very, very black and white. My solution, Xi Jinping to stand down. A reformed government. It doesn't have to be democratic. It can still be communist. Look at Vietnam. They have a communist country. Look at Cambodia. I think they have, but I think they have elections some way or the other. So it's sort of democratic. People are just scared. People are happy, but they just don't talk about it. They don't confront it. They just, okay, fine. It's a lot easier just to get on with it. I still have money, family, house, car, holidays, etc. So who cares about what the government is doing? It's just that we have lost the trust, because whatever China says, or we agree with, they don't do. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative, for example. The Belt and Road Initiative is where China invests millions, billions of dollars into developing countries, and then they want a return from this investment. When they can't do the investment, well, basically, they will take something from that country. Sri Lanka is a great example. They invested billions of dollars into a shipyard or a port. Sri Lanka couldn't basically pay for it. They took it over. So now China has a military base in Sri Lanka. They go for the poorer countries who need the money, who need the infrastructure, who don't have the money to build the actual infrastructure. And quite a lot of the time, it's not the highest quality there, but China always wins. They say we're going to employ locals with the Belt and Road Initiative, but a lot, like 70% of the workforce is actually Chinese. So the money sort of stays in China, and it doesn't really, or not all of it, gets invested into the country. That's the Belt and Road Initiative. And I was so happy when Italy pulled out, the only Western European country in the Belt and Road Initiative to pull out of it. And also to introduce BRICS, this developing world monetary system. You can see that no developed country is in that system because we go by the international hard currency of the US dollar. If it changed to something else, I think it would be a complete nightmare, especially if it's unorganized. Now, look at the euro, which happened in, 2000. It was well organized. It took about 4 or 5 years to do, between 95 and 2000. Now it's normal. This is what these people in BRICS want to do. But do we trust it? No, because when we look at history, this is how we trust people. Look at how your mum looked after you when you were a baby. Now, maybe you can't remember. That's the trust. Look at America and look at China. Look how they tried to come together, mostly through America, and China saying, yes, 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 and then turning their back on that and doing something completely different. So it's not a complicated thing. Now, I am doing this, granted, from a Western point of view. Now, I'm sure some people could do this from a Chinese point of view and say the opposite against Europe, America, Australia, developed countries. But there are developed countries in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, Singapore. Some cities in Asia are well developed, even in China, Shanghai, Bangkok, even to an extent you could say Kuala Lumpur. Please note, this is just my point of view with this, and time for coffee. It's so nice to have a cappuccino, or a cappuccino machine again. Right, back to the show. So this is why I think the world doesn't trust China, because we look at the history and it's not reliable. China's modern history between, you could say, the 1930s, 1940s, all the way up to today is just not trustworthy. And what do you think related to this? So your comments, your points of view, do you agree? Do you think I'm a muppet? Do you think I'm a fruitcake? Let me know. But constructive criticism. Don't just slag me off because you love Mao. In fact, here's a story. I was speaking to a friend of mine in Australia, and they've been in Australia for years and years and years. And the little kid overheard and actually said, "I love Mao Zedong." And I went, oh. And I don't know the education of that, but I was sort of like really, can I say disappointed or shocked that you've lived in the Western world for years and years. You've got the freedom of information. This is what the people in China don't have, freedom of information. They're only fed the information, you could say, from the state media, which is controlled by the government. Now, the Western people who love China, who live in China, would say it's the same as the BBC. The BBC is a big, huge corporation. It's not just news, it's also entertainment. And are we fed that? Yeah, We are. But we have more access to it. We have social media feeds. And I sort of believe more of the social media feeds of someone with a camera in their hand videoing the whole event, and we can see for ourselves, rather than someone like me now just rabbiting on in front of a camera that makes, you could say it makes sense, it makes logical sense, but you could say it is misinformation. So it gets quite complicated, but we all go through naturally. This is why a lot of people, or the world, doesn't trust China because of their past. And again, I sort of reiterate this, that how we need to earn the trust is that if there is an agreement, it's positive for both sides, it's positive for the world. China, very slowly with Xi Jinping, is basically digging a hole for itself. And for the Chinese people, they possibly may not know. Now, for the Chinese people out of the country, and they do watch international news like Fox, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Sky, whatever. Now, they can make up their own point of view, but they can see both sides. They can also watch CCTV 1 News, which is on at 7 o'clock every day on Station 1 in China. They can watch all of it. That's freely available. They can go to both sides of the argument. In China, basically, you can't go to both sides. There's only one side. So it's the manipulation of, you could even say brainwashing of, this is what's happening and nothing else. Yeah? And the thing is, it works. I speak to people in China quite a lot, for some of my friends in Shanghai or in Hong Kong. And I've even done some things on my channel before related to real people in China or in Hong Kong and their point of view. So who are you going to believe? A journalist who loves China, or a journalist who really doesn't like China, like you could say CNN in that way? Not all the time, but you could say quite a lot of the time. I'm sort of digging myself into a hole here, but I think you understand the drift of what I'm trying to say. I'm going to leave it there. I hope that many people would agree with me, and I hope that many people can share this on their social media so we can get the word out. The solution is very simple. China needs to get a new leader, like some of the old leaders from the late 1990s and the 2000s, where things were just okay. China was developing. China wasn't doing any bad stuff like national security law in Hong Kong. They weren't building military bases in the South China Sea. It was just developing, and getting stronger, and wanted to be a world player and friendly as well. But it's Xi Jinping's fault. And people are scared of him because he has got a lot of power. So if you go against him, basically you will disappear, or it'll be very difficult for you to do things. I would love a renowned journalist to interview Xi Jinping uncut, unedited, and have lots of translators around and put him on the spot and give the reason and ask him some real big questions about Hong Kong and real big questions about COVID, real big questions about Taiwan, etc., etc. The list goes on and on, but he never does, and he doesn't give interviews. A leader of the world who doesn't give interviews, he's hiding something, and that's why the world doesn't trust China. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.